Hello, Savannah. Hello, hello, hello. It's yours truly, your Alderwoman at Large for Post 1 of the city of Savannah. We are so excited to be with you again on a Monday night. I'm more excited to be joined by our state senator, Lester Jackson, who is going to give us some updates on our legislative process. And we just kind of want to walk you all through the process. Shortly, we will also be joined by House Representative of 160, District 163, Mr. Derek Mallow. And I think he's in the room, so if we can let him in. We are right now approaching what we call crossover for our legislative process. Dr. Jackson, I probably will use your titles interchangeably because I recognize you in both capacities as a local dentist as well as our state senator. So if I vacillate between Dr. Jackson and Senator Jackson, you know who I'm talking about, right? You're muted. You're muted.
Thank you for having me on your show. It's indeed a pleasure. I'm excited to be a part of your show, Alderman Gibson Carter. This is a wonderful time. We are on the tail end of our General Assembly. You know, constitutionally, we're only tasked to do one thing, and that's pass and balance a budget. At the state capitol, we settled on a $30 billion budget this year, $30 billion. We have to come to terms with both houses and the governor's office. And that's the only thing we constitutionally that's the only thing constitutionally we have to do. But we also pass bills and policies that govern this great state. And as we approach what we call the crossover day is that this is the last day that bills that rest in one house or the other can move over to the opposite house. So if a bill's in the House of Representatives been read and heard and passed, it must pass on crossover day. That's the last day, because if that bill did not pass over on crossover day, it's dead, and it can't be considered until next year. And likewise in the Senate, if a bill failed to pass on what we consider crossover day, it cannot be considered until the following year. Now, say that that's not exactly true, but that's why important crossover day is. We must pass bills out of one chamber to the next by crossover day. So it's a very important time. So this is a very busy time for us. We're all scrambling to get our bills heard, get our bills to the floor of the Senate or to the floor of the House, so that we can pass some meaningful legislation that benefit Georgia. Now, this is for general bills. We also have local bills that don't have to act on crossover day. For instance, I have one local bill. It's a school board bill that gives the school board $1,000, and that's a local bill that has to be voted on.
You froze a little bit. It gives the school board what? A local bill that gives the school board
a pay raise. Currently, school board members make about $14,000 a year. We want to give them a pay raise equal to the councilmen of the city of Savannah and comparable to county commissioners in Chatham County, about $25,000. And that's a local bill, so we don't have to pass that until of the session. So, and we're working on that. We're working on a much needed bill to not only thank those great school board members that do a wonderful job for Chatham schools, also call some, and that's what we call a local bill that doesn't fall by the same rules of a general bill.
Okay, and so with regard to some of the local bills, we know we have submitted to our delegation some legislative items on behalf of the city of Savannah. One that is huge is the hotel motel tax. One that's personal and near and dear to my heart is relief and support for child sex trafficking or trafficking in general here. And then we know we have some maneuvering of sorts with regard to casino and gambling for Savannah. And I want to give you an opportunity, Representative Mallow, to sort of chime in on what you have been working on. But while he's doing that, Senator Jackson, I just wanted to give you a little bit of an opportunity to think about some of what I just presented. Representative Mallow, what are you working on, and what's going on for you?
Well, I'm working with Senator Jackson. We both have sponsored the same legislation in the House and in the Senate. We're running concurrent bills to destroy firearms that are held in the custody of our law enforcement agencies in Savannah, to move them from evidence to a place where they can be destroyed, used for the purposes of training or lab testing with the GBI. I'm also working on a rental tax credit bill. I've got a fiscal note on that bill. I'm working to get a hearing in Ways and Means to try to move that bill. Basically, I provide a $60 tax credit back to renters. The state of Georgia does not have an earned income tax credit for our most vulnerable citizens. And this is a tax cut for the poor and the impoverished in our community. So I'm working on that bill. I'm also working on a juvenile justice bill. I've gotten 3 co-sponsors today. I'm working on a bill that would eliminate juvenile life without parole. It would also reverse life without parole for sentences for juveniles in the state of Georgia, so that a juvenile could not be sentenced to death or to life without the possibility of parole in the state of Georgia. That's a huge piece of legislation, because our babies are being sentenced right now today to life without the possibility of parole. Some are being sentenced to death, and I believe that no child can commit an act as a child that they will not in 30 years regret what they've done as a youth. And so that would also be retroactive legislation. I'm also working on a constitutional amendment to allow for cities to enter into long-term lease and development agreements for the purposes of building affordable housing, so that developers would have 30 years to receive tax credits and abatements, so that statewide we can increase affordable housing for our most vulnerable citizens throughout the state by allowing governments to enter into long-term lease agreements so that they don't have to sell real estate to developers, they can lease it. And that's beneficial to make sure that the development for the purpose of the long-term development is affordable, and that that property reverts back to the hands of the government who entered into the lease agreement for the purpose to determine its future. And that's extremely important. The last issue that I'm working
that
on.
is, I have to stop you right there. That is so relevant to Savannah. And hearing you say that is music to my ears, because when we factor in what happened with Chatham Apartments, we know that the developers 20 years ago received tax subsidy.
Yep.
And we now know that 20 years is the new 2 years, right? That time passes very, very fast. And in that time span, we see how the complexion and the demography of our community can change within 2 short decades. And so when we look at affordable housing options and we enter into these contractual agreements with developers who take the tax subsidy only to revert that development into market
Private
rate,
hands.
you're closing out, not only are you closing out marginal citizens and people who need those subsidies to live in these facilities, like senior citizens and individuals who have issues with disabilities and mental health. We recognize how important that is. And so, where are we in terms of realizing that? Because now our local government is poised to enter into several affordable housing options as a result of what we have experienced by way of many of these development projects reverting back to market rate rent. I have been advocating for the city of Savannah to own its own affordable housing options. And so, how close are we to realizing this legislation that you are proposing?
I'm really close. I've got the constitutional amendment, which I've been working with some folks on the governor side as well as on the Senate side with Senator Jackson on trying to make that a reality, but first trying to get it out of the House first. And the reason for that is because cities are capped at only entering into agreements for 10 years. That's the amount that constitutionally a city can enter into a long-term lease agreement. In order for our cities to have affordable housing that qualifies for the tax abatements in the state and the subsidies, we need to extend it to 30 years so governments don't feel pressured that they have to sell the development or the real estate in order for it to benefit those who are poor and impoverished for the long term. And so I'm championing that cause now. Of course, you know, as a freshman legislator, I've always come out with these big bills. And so I'm still lifting it. But I have good support from Atlanta. I've got good support out of Augusta. And so I'm trying to build this regional collaborative to get this out by crossover day. And so I'm running around like a chicken with his head cut off. And actually, I'm at a meeting now to try to gain some more support for this initiative with this constitutional amendment. And so we've got support from the Atlanta elected officials in the state house. And I hope that that will continue and we can get this lifted because we need it.
Well, we really appreciate you pausing and giving us some of your time. And I thank you both, especially for just picking up the phone when I call. I think you're kind of afraid not to, right?
No.
We thank you for just listening and being a voice. And Senator Jackson, you have been a great listener and a great voice for us on City Council who are in the minority, who have been advocating to just get an incremental opportunity for the hotel motel tax for our marginalized citizens in Savannah. We know that the long and short of the hotel motel tax is to provide what they deem as a critical investment for our tourism industry. We're looking at a surplus of $65 million that could come from this hotel motel tax. We, as local officials, have our eye on the ball and our finger on the pulse of the greatest need in Savannah. And when we look at the distribution of that $65 million, the potential for the $65 million, we do not really see any of that meeting the need of our constituents or the city as a whole. It's for tourism. And you and I both know that these are essentially restricted funds. And we've heard the leader of this city kind of taunt that the city of Savannah, one of the largest municipalities when it comes to tourism, is low on the totem pole where the hotel motel tax is concerned in comparison to some of the smaller cities. But when I see that there is an equitable distribution where this is concerned, I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us. When we have $20 million going to Tide to Town or the trail, and when we have another $20 million earmarked for the Canal District, and another couple of million, 1 million or so for a signage or what do they call it, wayfinding. You don't really see a heartbeat. And I've talked for a long time about giving Savannah a heartbeat. And one of the reasons why I cannot support the petition for the hotel motel tax is because it does not have a heartbeat where our people are concerned. Right now, by way of the Georgia state statute, we cannot do very much about the wages with regard to the minimum wage in Georgia, right? We do not have the authority to increase the minimum wage. But what we do have the authority of is our influence and our political power when it comes to lobbying individuals within our hospitality industry who are paying people who clean toilets and make beds less than $12 an hour, between $12 and $13 an hour. And that's simply unacceptable. And what we have seen demonstrated as a result of the pandemic, we have seen COVID-like implications come to life during this pandemic in the lives of people as well as our government. And so if we cannot be compassionate enough to be compelled to look at the allocation and the distribution of these funds to where we can give it a heartbeat, I'm simply not inclined to support it. And it is my hope that you too will use your influence, your power, and your authority as the senior senator to say, listen to the minorities on the council. And by way of minority, I don't mean gender or race. I mean minority in number. Myself, Alderwoman Miller Blakely, and Alderwoman Bryant Lanier have been advocating for more equity in distribution of these funds.
Well, Alderman Carter, let me just tell you this. Last year, when the hotel motel tax was presented to the local delegation, it was something, first of all, any local legislation has to be passed by a majority of the members of the House of Representatives and both senators. although they had the votes for the majority of the House of Representatives, when it came to the Senate, it was something that I just couldn't support because I didn't see broad distribution of the 6% of that tax money, and I didn't feel comfortable allowing another 2% that equates to more than $60 million to be to be distributed again, where none of that money is is um, is going to working class. None of that money has been earmarked for disadvantaged people, to address the homeless situation, to address the underemployment situation. I saw this hotel motel tax as a way of the rich getting richer and poor people continue to suffer in Savannah, Georgia. We live in a community where 28% of Savannah lives below the poverty line. We can't continue to pass ordinances, to pass resolutions where we increase taxes and none of it goes to the underserved or the working class community. But I'm still talking to city officials, still working with you and many other aldermen to make sure that there's a broad distribution of this $60+ million. And I will tell you, it will equate to more than $60 million over the course of years. So I'm listening to the people of Savannah, and they're telling me unless we have more broader distribution, some of the money going into working class communities, going into um, neighborhoods to address housing, to address the homeless, to address teenage pregnancy. We cannot continue to support taxing the people of Savannah, taxing the tourists, unless we see some broad distribution of these funds.
Right. And some proponents of the hotel motel tax will say, well, you cannot use the funds for those items because they are restricted for a tourism product. Well, the thing I say to that is you and I both know how the maneuvering with regard to budgeting goes, right? And so
Mhm.
there are ways in which we can move money around and make room for absorbing some of those proceeds in the areas of which we are now expending. So, take for example, law enforcement. We utilize a great percentage of our law enforcement to police our downtown corridors simply because of our tourists and visitors to Savannah. And we receive zero in return for that support and those efforts. And so, all we have been asking for is to take care of the people who undergird the tourism industry, who are essentially the backbone of the tourism industry. And I do want to add that this particular hotel motel tax increase is not all that popular by all of our hoteliers. There are some who feel like they won't get as much of a benefit from increasing the hotel motel tax. And while some may say that this is a tax that will be passed on to visitors and people who seek to stay here by way of touring here, we do know that we, as citizens of Savannah, we have family members who also come to Savannah to visit, and we don't want those costs to price them out unless there is some greater benefit for the community as a whole. And so when we see budgetary maneuvering consistent with not having a heartbeat, right now we have mass expansion going on across the bridge at the Trade Center. The governor's office has dedicated millions of dollars to that project. And all I can think of is how much more would we be as a harmonious community if we could garner some of that resource. Right now, I'm looking at a text message from another alert of a teenager who has essentially lost his life on the streets of Savannah, 16 years old. We are closing out February with a very, very bloody total of lives taken via gun violence on our streets of Savannah. And while we listen and we hear to accounts of what's going on across the nation with regard to policing, with regard to crime, and with regard to poverty, what we say here in Savannah is we have enough resource in the house so that we are not being consistent with those standards across the country. We here in Savannah generate the most money for Georgia, only second to Atlanta. And when we look at the magnitude of our bearing capacity with regard to that type of resource, we must do more for the people of Savannah. We have to do more for the people who live here and pay taxes here than the people who tour, visit, and transition in and out of Savannah. And we are happy that you have heard our voice, and we are encouraged that for those who are pushing this hotel motel tax, they will slow the process enough to listen. And we were basically, of the $65 million, it was only $7.5 million that we were asking for to support the African American Chamber, Hispanic Chamber, to provide support to those individuals who work within our hospitality industry so that we are building their capacity as workers, as well as providing support for their families. Individuals who work within the hospitality industry can't even afford to park downtown. So much of what we were asking for was essentially giving the workers within the industry some semblance of relief. If we can't pay them directly, we need to make resources indirectly benefit them. Now, with regard to our legislative agenda, we paid a lobbyist a little over $100,000, or we're paying them, or $100,000 thereabout, to lobby on our behalf. And it's been said that oftentimes we probably don't receive much directly, but indirectly they're able to block a lot. I still haven't seen the results of that either. Nonetheless, some of what we have positioned for this lobbying group, and I just want to know, have you connected with our lobbyists? Have they connected with you?
Well, I've been in conversation with Mr. Marcelo Stewart,
Okay.
who's a part of that lobbying team, and I will tell you, he understands my desires and my opinion about the hotel motel tax being an exclusive tax, and I've had that conversation until we show that a broad spectrum of support for different organizations, that I cannot support a tax that I think that may be regressive because it's not inclusive of all of Savannah. Uh, uh,
Hmm.
when you talk about the Savannah Chamber, the Savannah Black Chamber, and the Hispanic Chamber not being allowed to participate in this tax, that doesn't represent Savannah. So Savannah is the city that is is predominantly minority, and the fact that not a minority organization it can participate in the benefits of this hotel motel tax does not seem that it's going to benefit Savannah as a whole. I think $7.5 million isn't enough when we're talking about addressing the homeless situation. I don't think $7 million is enough when we're talking about doing things to not only uh, address tourism, but address the things that go along with tourism, better streets, better housing for our workers that work day and night, better salaries for those workers, and better protection for those workers that work in the hotel industry. Um, I am a I'm not a big tax guy, and I think that unless we talk about inclusion, we cannot talk about a tax that's going to be regressive for the people of Savannah and those that visit.
And I just want to briefly let our listening public know what was submitted uh, to our lobbyists by way of the interests of the city of Savannah via our 2022 legislative agenda, which is inclusive of the hotel motel tax, which would give the city of Savannah the authority to increase the current tax rate from 6% to 8%. And what I also want to add there, Dr. Jackson, is the fact that in doing this, we actually, our bottom line would be less with regard to the formula that is being used in terms of how much we are authorized to divide with our chamber and the hospitality industry. Confiscate weapons allow local governments the ability to sell or destroy confiscated weapons when the rightful owner cannot be determined or located. And we do know that um, this is an important piece of legislation, more important in that it would become one of the opportunities, or this new term they call tools in the toolbox, where we can start backdooring our way to averting some of the gun violence in our streets. Again, I find most disheartening the fact that we have not highlighted as a primary issue and a public health issue in an emergency situation the number of African American men and boys who are losing their lives on the streets of Savannah. Right now, we have eclipsed the number of homicide every year since we have been in office, and almost every month since we have been in office. We have had more African American men and boys die on the watch of a super majority African American council. And so, what must we say to these things? We cannot simply say, parents, do you know where your child is? We cannot simply say, this is a trend that's occurring across the nation. At some juncture, we must dial back as a city, as a county, and as a state and identify ways in which we can retool and better utilize our resources so that we are averting crime, but also so that we are in tandem to being reactive, working proactively to avert some of these episodes that is leaving families in traumatic situations. Further, we have here workforce housing initiatives. These are all fancy words. We got workforce housing, affordable housing, transitional housing. Well, I think we should start looking more toward income-based housing, because you can only afford the housing that your money can buy you. And affordable is all relative in the grand scheme. What's affordable to you, Dr. Jackson, is not affordable to me. And so when we use these broad terms, that's when I become less trusting of these processes that we enter into and seek to really get down and drill down into the teeth. I encountered a group of pastors earlier today, and I just acknowledge that there is a sense of emergency where I'm concerned, and I'm less inclined to listen to rhetoric and promises of politicians, and more inclined to see what we have by way of reality, which is consistent with the fact that in just 2 to 5 short years, if something is not done via strong policies, we will not be able to have a community that is culturally blended. We will not live in a Savannah that is home to the working class. We will not live in a Savannah where minorities will be invited in just 2 to 5 short years. Because if you drive through the corridors of the most vulnerable of our community, or what was known as predominantly minority and vulnerable communities, you will see rapid development of high-rise condos. You will see rapid development of infill homes that are pricing out the residents who live there. And so I said to this group of pastors, the people who are populating your pews right now, in 2 to 5 years, they will have to commute in to come to your church, because they will not be able to afford housing. They will not be able to afford to live in Savannah. And so what that means is those people who are populating those pews will be forced out to Pooler, Port Wentworth, Garden City, Rinking, Effingham, even Statesboro. And what does that translate to? Before long, they will no longer be commuting in. They won't be able to afford that. Gas right now is almost $4 a gallon. What that means is that our African American churches and minority churches will choke and die. In those churches where even working class white people will not be able to afford. And we see what happened to Bethel AME Church, where right before our very eyes, the historic church was destroyed, demolished. And so we're talking about a lot about critical race theory in our educational system. We need to think about those erasures that are happening right here in our community. Look at what happened to the Weeping Time. Look at what happened to Clearview. Look at what's happening to Yamakra. And so we have to wake up as a community. We can no longer major in the distractions of the day that often have my name in the headlines. But what we must do, we must champion an issue. You must connect with your local sitting officials as well. We let the county off the hook a great deal. And we must make a demand with regard to what it is that we need in our community. And those needs cannot be met without a policy and legislation to drive new ordinances. And
And and,
so,
and
go
Ms.
ahead.
Carter, you're absolutely right. So many Savannahans are being priced out of their homes. There's so many Savannahans that can no longer afford to pay rent close to their jobs. They can no longer to afford to afford their homes. Uh, and you see the trend already. I don't think it's going to be 5 years. You see the trend already. People are moving to Garden City and Port Wentworth because the rent and the housing market is just so high. And I understand that we need to create more affordable homes, and it can't be and it can't we just can't rely on big business to build affordable homes. It must be job close to
Mhm.
their work environment and close to their schools.
And we want to acknowledge that we invite outsiders. We invite a community that can continuously be culturally blended. But what we do not invite are those invasions that are forcing out the people who made up the culture of Savannah. You know, we want a Savannah where your children and my children will be able to live here, thrive here, and grow here. But with the current dynamic that we have today, we'd be hard pressed to say for sure whether or not, after our children have matriculated in colleges outside of Savannah and outside of Georgia, whether or not they will be able to come back to Savannah.
And we also have to diverse our job market. I mean, people boast on Savannah being a large tourism industry, but what happens is when doing the tourism industry, most people that work in the tourism market work below the livable wage. Be below $12 an hour, and we cannot sustain a family for $12 an hour
Right.
salary. So we have to diverse our job market to come in and offer jobs that offer skills, that offer benefits. We need to give people grants to become entrepreneurs. So what Savannah is starving for, or skilled workforce. If you notice these hotels going up, if you ever ride by these hotels going up or these big complexes going up, and you look at the car tags, they don't say Chatham County.
Right.
They're coming from somewhere else. They're
Hmm.
coming somewhere. And if you look at the workers, they don't look like native Savannahans.
And
So
the
so
same
we
is with the film industry when we're shooting a movie here.
they they don't look like us. I mean, they don't have a Chatham County tag. So
Hmm.
so what I'm saying is, as government, as state government, local government, we need to reinvest in ourselves. Start programs where we offer these types of jobs, these type of skills to native Savannahans who are going to reinvest, who's going to invest their time and their money back into the community versus working, and then after they get their wealth, they leave the city and go to another site. We see it time and time again, and while we boast on these uh, tourism jobs, it doesn't make this community. It doesn't make this community grow, and it's not good unless we combine the tourism industry with some some vocational and technology. So we could train carpenters, we could train tech workers, we can train people for the entertainment industry, and we're not doing it. So we need to do more of that.
And a couple more of the legislative items we have, Dr. Jackson, are the taxpayer clarity to the taxpayer bill of rights. And this basically is the taxpayer bill of rights is designed to notify the public that the overall digest has increased in value. However, wording of the notice fails to differentiate the difference
Hello?
between increased millage. I'm sorry, I didn't notice you were not there. So we want to
Hello?
acknowledge. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Hello?
Can you hear me?
I can't hear you.
You still can't hear me? You still can't hear me? Can you hear me? Can we? You're muted. You have to unmute. Can we let Representative Mallow back in as well? Uh, can you unmute? You're muted.
Testing, testing,
There you go.
testing.
Can you hear me
Can you
now?
hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can hear me. I can't hear any sound.
You can't hear me? Okay, he says go out and come back in. But other items, I just want to let you know that are on the legislative agenda for the city of Savannah. Is this taxpayer bill of rights advertisement? This is a big one for me because when we advertise the millage rate is advertised, and there must be some notification of the advertisement. And the confusion is when we say that we are going to keep the millage rate the same, oftentimes that translates to a property tax increase if we are not rolling it back. And the first year in office, we lobbied really, really hard to roll it back. But this previous year, the majority on council voted to keep it the same, which ultimately resulted in the property tax value of our citizens going up, which resulted in your tax bill going up. And so by now, you all probably have received notification of that increase. And so this particular piece of legislation just asks to clarify, because there's oftentimes some debate as to whether or not we go back and forth with who's on second, who's on third, in terms of whether or not a person's property tax is going to increase. So the fact of the matter is, every year, bless God, like now, we're living in a good year, your property tax value increases. And so if that millage rate stays the same, essentially, if it's not rolled back, your property taxes will increase. And so this particular piece of legislation takes away the ambiguity of the law, and it helps citizens and prevents politicians from having this debate as to whether or not their vote increased somebody's taxes. And then we have the pieces related to the logistics technology corridor. I'm going over, Representative Mallow, the various pieces that we have submitted by way of our legislative agenda. And I hope you have been presented with these items. Have you spoken with our lobbyists at all?
I have. She's dropped by my office. I've spoken with Mr. Stewart on a number of some of the items from the agenda. They did give me a copy of it, and the lobbyists for the city did come by my office today, but I'm not in my office because I'm working.
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving through the Capitol, moving through the various between the legislative office building and the Capitol. So I am familiar with that, and I am proactively addressing several issues on that agenda. But as one representative, I can't lift the entire
Right.
city legislative agenda by myself. I would hope that some of my colleagues will take up measures on that. My issues will be with juvenile justice, with juvenile life without parole, and the sentencing guidelines for the mandatory minimums for children in the state of Georgia. Chatham County incarcerates more juveniles, second only to Fulton County. That's a problem. And our juvenile justices, our jurists in juvenile court need more tools in the toolkit to help them address that issue. Secondly, with affordable housing, moving the long-term lease agreement for cities, the rental tax credit bill, and lastly, moving for the destruction of seized property. This is not a bill that is for any one person. this allows governments the opportunity to destroy property that they seize, because we know that these weapons, you make it back on the street, they're basically stolen out of an unlocked car that someone left unattended, and so we want to make sure that these weapons don't end up in the hands of our children so that they kill other children in our community. We want to do something about that. So those are the issues that I have right on the forefront that I'm working on from the city's legislative agenda. And y'all, it's not easy trying to get support for a lot of this stuff. It is a heavy lift, not only drafting the bill, but trying to get folks to co-sponsor with you to help you get to a hearing, to help you move that bill. It takes so much work to move just one bill. And a Republican-controlled legislature is a Democrat. You got to be willing to work. So thank you for that opportunity and for you all developing such a wonderful agenda legislatively. But it's something that I think that is such a big agenda. We'll continue to have to move through that agenda in years to come, but at least we've got a framework to start it right now. And so I'll be more than happy to share with you the legislation when I file it so that you can look at it and see what you think.
Well, I appreciate that. And we kind of check the boxes on the weapons confiscation as well as the rent control. We're happy to know that you're working on that. One of the other big ones that a lot of people here locally would be interested in would be the short-term vacation rentals, where supporting home rule regulation of short-term rules is certainly necessary for us
Yeah,
here in Savannah. And I think
I
we
stopped
kind
that
of
bill last year.
Yes. Tell us a little bit about that, because I think we got to the point where the opportunity got ahead of any particular regulations we could put forth, and now it's becoming quite a sticky situation.
So last year, the short-term vacation rental bill did not come to the House floor for a vote. I went to Representative Casey Carpenter, the Republican from Dalton, and I asked him to hold that bill because it was disadvantageous to my community, the folks who live in downtown that want a quality of life, all of our citizens that live in that area, my seniors and my senior saints. I said, Derek, we don't want party houses next to our houses. We want to have peace and quiet. That's why we've lived here for 30, 40 years. So he agreed to hold that bill for me. And I found legislation that he had that he wanted to see move and he needed bipartisan support on. And we were able to compromise. And so I'm looking to see where that bill moves through the legislature now. I understand that the Speaker Pro Tem has that legislation, but there's always a give and trade in the House. We've been in a posture of not supporting anything that required a constitutional vote, which meaning 2/3 of the House have to vote, not the 91 on the day-to-day, but you have to get to that 120 mark. And without Democrats, they just can't get there. And so I think the negotiations will start where those constitutional amendments are coming up to a vote, as well as those constitutional majority votes are coming up. And they need 2/3 of the House to do that. So hopefully we can horse trade again, find support where we can on the things that we can, and compromise to make sure that we can hold that bill for short-term vacation rentals so that you at City Council with the rest of your colleagues can manage that for Savannah and not the state try to manage that for you.
Yes, that would be nice. And it's something that's still going to be problematic for us to figure out as we seek to give provisions to those who are trying to make a living, generating income, but also how do we strike a fine balance with preserving the integrity of neighborhoods and just creating an equitable situation. We also have support for sustainability initiatives, which essentially would eliminate or raise the Public Service Commission's cap on monthly netting for behind the meter solar programs, which is very pivotal to our clean energy goal that we have for Savannah. And then one that's near and dear to my heart is support funding for safe house facilities and programs addressing abuse and commercial sex exploitation of children.
Yeah.
Right now, we have no formal support opportunities from the state level here in Savannah. Macon, Georgia, and Atlanta, Georgia is it between Atlanta and Savannah. And so we definitely want some type of support here on this end of the state. I do understand that there is some movement to garner support in this area, and we're just hoping that the dollars will follow the intent. I want you to close out. Just tell us a little bit about your campaign and the fact that you're planning to leave this post, and What are you looking forward to, and what your platform consists of for state senator?
Well, thanks everybody. For those who don't know, I'm running for the second senatorial district to succeed Dr. Lester Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all for tuning in tonight. As you all know, I've been a force in the House as a freshman legislator. I've worked to get Savannah State funding, $4.5 million in this last appropriation cycle last year. I worked my butt off to get that. We had $3 million in compensation resolutions that came through in the House, and we passed those. I worked to reform public transportation. I'm not done. I'm still working to reform public transportation for poor and impoverished people, because truly the gateway to a prosperous Chatham County is through public transportation that's equitable and inclusive of all. So as state senator, I'm looking for transportation to be public throughout all of the municipalities in Chatham County. In order for people to have access to resources and high wage paying jobs, the folks that live on Stevens Street where I live got to be able to get to the Tanger outlets and everything in between. We need to make sure that they can touch Lottie, Dottie, and everybody. And that is the gateway. When I was a child, my grandmother took the charter bus. But there was a bus that took us to Wilmington Island because she worked for families on Wilmington Island. There wasn't a cat bus. It was a big charter bus that would take us from Savannah all the way over to Wilmington Island. Okay, and I remember that. And guess what? Now we have a bus that goes to Wilmington Island. There are many people who work on Wilmington Island that don't live there. And in order for that gateway to be connected, it's through public transportation. I'm still going to fight for QBE and reforming the quality basic education formula that had been updated since 1980. God knows I was born in 1980, so we need to update it because it's outdated. Technology has increased. We have 5G. Back then, they were probably using a word processor. We've got to make those improvements so larger, more metro districts are not penalized in the QBE formula. So we got to do that. We got some criminal justice work to do. We also got to work to make sure that we maintain some reforms and our returning citizens coming back out to create pathways and opportunities for them. We need more affordable housing initiatives at the state. We need to raise our state homestead exemption, and we need to create an earned income tax credit for the state of Georgia for poor and impoverished people. They need a tax cut. The state gives out great subsidies to corporations and billions to those who have the most wealth in our community. And poor people need a tax cut too because they need relief and they need it from the state. We had a $30 billion surplus, so we have the money to do it. And so when we start lifting and doing those things, that's what I hope to fight for, moving over to the Senate. That's my platform and that's my plan. And everything that I'm talking about, I've drafted the legislation in the House. And if I can't pass it this session, I'm picking up my bills and I'm going over to the Senate with them. And I'll fight just as hard in the Senate. And one thing about Derek Mallow running for Senate, I know my rules and I know my parliamentary procedures and I know how to get things done. And so with that, Alderwoman, I thank you for the opportunity. And with that, I yield my time back to you, Alderwoman, on your show. And thank you for this amazing opportunity.
I tell you what, it takes a lot of energy to do what you are doing. I thought I was busy, but you certainly appear to have the stamina for it, the energy, and you have to be cut from a certain cloth to do this level of work. And so we want to wish you well in all of your endeavors, and we want to say thank you for all that you have done for the 163rd district. And we want people to know that you are yet still the representative. And if there are any needs or anything that you can assist with, I'm sure that you are still making yourself available to the citizens. And do you want to let us know when election day is and where and who can vote for you? And because not everybody can vote for this particular seat, right?
Absolutely. May 24th, if you live in Thunderbolt, if you live in East Savannah, you live on the East Savannah East Side, you live in the Nottingham area, Planters Common, all the way over to some of the South Side by Windsor Forest, all the way over to the West Side, to West Savannah, Garden City to Fort Wentworth. You can vote for me to be your next state senator. Everybody in my old hood can vote for me. Everybody from 36 and Waters, from Waters all the way to Ash, and from Waters all the way back to Art and Harmon. Everybody over there going to vote for me. That's my community, my neighborhood. So vote on May 24th. There are going to be a lot of other people that run in different races. I'm running my own race. I'm focused on my own race, but I am not leaving my post as state representative. I will serve until January 9th, 2023. I'm not vacating my seat. I'm not abdicating my responsibilities. All of my neighborhood association presidents received a letter from me that told them I am in session. Let me know your concerns. I'm available. My cell phone number is available to my constituents. If you got issues with Department of Transportation, you got issues with the state, I will go and get that entity and that agency and bring it back to you. Ask my folks on West Victory Drive, my constituents who have GDOT issues, we'll take care of them and we'll get your concerns answered because I am a representative that believes in constituent services and I don't hide from my constituents. I'm always available to them.
Well, we thank you so much for the time that you have carved out for us here tonight. And this is election season, a very, very busy season, and we are going to be sharing this platform with candidates as we go forth, just letting our citizens know who's all in the race. It's very, very important. One of the things I said to a group of Weeping Time activists and advocates is, we mobilize during campaign season, and we ask people to come out and vote for us. And we ask them to stand in long lines and early vote, only to leave us during our tenure. And so we want you to know that once you cast your vote, your civic service is not over. You must continuously engage and connect with your elected officials to let them know that they are accountable to you. And we are so encouraged and so inspired that we have been able to mobilize and infuse excitement and motivation into an electorate who has never been as engaged as they are now. And so, in as much as we talk about what is said and what is heard in this political season and during these various councils and commissions and state level representatives and senators, I don't know that our citizens have been as engaged, as educated and knowledgeable of the political process and their civic responsibilities. And so we thank you for engaging. I am encouraged and inspired by your participation, and we will continue to go forth in my role as your Alderwoman at Large for Post 1. And I am still planning to run for mayor of the city of Savannah, and we're looking for your vote and your support November of 2023. With that said, I don't think our dear senator is going to make it back in. We wanted him to talk about his bid for Leicester for Labor. Senator Lester Jackson will be running for Labor Commissioner, and I'm sure he would be asking for your support as well. You can look him up on his website, Leicester for Labor for the state of Georgia, and find out more about him, get his contact information, and share with him as well. We want to say thanks to everyone who has tuned in, our faithful and intrepid viewers. And yes, Chuck, the messages are coming up really, really fast, but we do know that there's some unique maneuvering going on with the maps. We had maps drawn and approved, but then we had some individuals who have decided to stir with the maps. And so we have a $30 billion surplus in our state budget. And we are remiss because we did not ask Representative Mallow or Senator Jackson what the plan was for that. So continue to keep your eye on the ball, continue to track and follow us. Call your city council members, talk to them about your knowledge of the potential increase of the hotel motel tax, and just tell them that we need to put a heartbeat in those allocations and show some love to the people who live here, in addition to the people who tour here. With that, I want you all to know that I am still here and we're still advocating, we're still thriving, and we are doing more than surviving. With that, I want to say I love you, Savannah, and good night.
like this. I like this.